When I walked across the graduation stage, holding my diploma tightly in my hands, I thought that moment would finally change everything between me and my parents. I thought I would see tears of pride in their eyes, maybe even hear the words I had been longing for my entire life. "We're proud of you." But instead, when I showed them the certificate, they laughed. They told me it had to be fake, that there was no way I could have really graduated. It wasn't the first time they doubted me, but it was the first time their disbelief truly crushed me. For as long as I can remember, I was always treated as the disappointment of the family. My older siblings were the golden children, always praised, always compared against me. If my brother scored well on a test, I was reminded that I should try harder like him. If my sister excelled in sports, I was reminded that I was lazy. Nothing I ever did was good enough. The graduation was supposed to be my moment of redemption. I thought walking across that stage, with hundreds of people cheering, would be undeniable proof that I had accomplished something real. But my parents didn't even bother to attend. And when I showed them the diploma at home, they accused me of lying. They said maybe I forged it, or maybe the university lowered its standards. Their words stung like fire, burning away the little hope I had left for their approval. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the diploma. I should have been celebrating, but instead, tears filled my eyes. A small voice inside me kept repeating, "Why can't they just believe in me? Why can't they just love me the way they love the others?" It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but at the same time, something shifted inside me. If they were never going to see my worth, I would have to prove it to myself. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to spend my life chasing their approval anymore. I wasn't going to beg for scraps of validation. Instead, I was going to carve out a path so undeniable that even their doubts couldn't touch me. I applied for jobs relentlessly, not caring how small they were. I didn't care if I started at the very bottom. I just wanted to work, to build myself up from scratch, and to prove, even if only to myself, that I was capable of more than they ever imagined. When I finally got my first real job, it wasn't glamorous. I was just an assistant in a large company, fetching coffee and sorting files. But to me, it was the start of something bigger. Every morning, when I walked through those office doors, I felt a quiet determination. No one knew my past. No one knew my family's cruel words. To my coworkers, I was just another employee, and that anonymity gave me freedom. I could be whoever I wanted to become. At first, the work was exhausting. I stayed late organizing files that no one cared about, double-checking spreadsheets, and running errands. Most people would have seen it as meaningless, but to me, it was training. Every task, no matter how small, became proof that I could handle responsibility. And slowly, I began to notice that my efforts were not going unnoticed. A manager praised me for catching a mistake in an important report. A team leader started trusting me with bigger responsibilities. For the first time in my life, I was being valued for what I could actually do, not dismissed for what people assumed about me. The long hours weren't easy, and there were many nights I thought about quitting. But each time the thought crept in, I remembered my parents' laughter when they told me my diploma was fake. That memory was like fuel, pushing me harder. I promised myself I would never again give them the satisfaction of seeing me fail. I wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore, I was building something. Over time, my role shifted. I was no longer just the assistant fetching coffee. I started contributing ideas during meetings, and to my surprise, some of them were actually implemented. That small recognition gave me confidence, and soon I was volunteering for projects that others were too hesitant to touch. Difficult clients, messy deadlines, complicated reports, I took them all on. I figured that the more challenges I faced, the stronger I'd become. My coworkers began to see me differently. Instead of the quiet girl at the bottom, I became the person they could rely on. And while they saw only a hard-working colleague, inside I was still the daughter who had been told she'd never amount to anything. That memory never left me, but instead of holding me back, it drove me forward. Years passed this way. I poured myself into the company, sacrificing weekends, vacations, even relationships, because I was determined to prove that I was capable of greatness. Every promotion I earned felt like another silent victory against the voices of doubt that haunted me. When I moved from assistant to coordinator, then to manager, I knew I was climbing faster than most people expected. And yet, no matter how far I came, my parents never asked about my work. They never congratulated me, never once said they were proud. Family gatherings were always the same. My siblings' successes were celebrated while I sat in the corner, ignored. I stopped trying to tell them about my achievements. I stopped trying to share anything at all. If they wanted to believe I was a failure, I would let them. I didn't need their validation anymore. Still, deep down, a part of me longed for the day they would finally see the truth. I didn't know how or when it would happen, but I knew that someday they would be forced to face the reality they had denied for so long. And when that moment came, I wanted to be ready. The turning point came sooner than I expected. After years of steady progress, I was offered a leadership position that felt almost surreal. Director of Operations, a role I had once only dreamed of, one that came with a private office, a team of managers under me, and a voice in shaping the future of the company. I accepted without hesitation, but even as I celebrated, a part of me thought of my parents. Would this finally be the kind of success they couldn't deny? For a while, I tried not to think about them. My focus was on the new responsibilities, the endless meetings, and the pressure of making big decisions. But then one morning, as I reviewed a stack of new applications for management roles in our expansion, my heart stopped. There, printed in bold letters, were the names of my parents. I blinked, thinking I must have imagined it. But no, it was real. They had applied for jobs in my department. I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers. The irony was almost too much to process. These were the same people who laughed at me, who told me my degree was worthless, who never once believed in me. And now, unknowingly, they were asking for a chance. From me. A part of me wanted to crumple their applications and toss them into the trash. Another part wanted to confront them, to throw their words back in their faces. But the longer I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to humiliate them. The very situation itself was enough. The day of the interviews arrived, and I prepared myself for what would be one of the strangest encounters of my life. My parents walked into the office, dressed in their best clothes, holding their resumes nervously. The moment they saw me sitting at the desk, their faces froze. My mother's eyes widened, my father's jaw tightened. It was as if the ground beneath them had given way. "Good morning," I said calmly, gesturing toward the chairs across from me. "Please, have a seat." They exchanged a glance, but neither spoke. For once, they were the ones caught off guard, unsure of what to say. I leaned back in my chair, studying them. In that moment, I wasn't their daughter begging for recognition. I was their superior, their boss. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy, until finally my father cleared his throat. You work here?" His voice was uncertain, almost fragile. "I don't just work here," I replied evenly. "I run this department, and today I'll be interviewing you." The shock in their eyes was indescribable. For years they had painted me as the failure, the one who would never amount to anything. But now the roles had reversed. They were the ones seeking approval, and I was the one holding the power. I watched them shift uncomfortably in their seats, and for the first time in my life, I felt no need to shrink in their presence. They had spent years making me feel small, and now, without saying a single cruel word, the balance had shifted completely. I began the interview as I would with any other candidates. I asked about their experience, their skills, their goals. My mother stammered through her answers, avoiding my gaze. My father tried to hold his composure, but I could see his hands tightening around the resume he clutched like a lifeline. Every second that passed seemed to remind them of the years they had dismissed me, the years they had laughed at my ambitions. And yet, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw their cruelty back in their faces. Instead, I stayed professional, calm, and composed. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about showing them that I had grown into someone they could never have imagined, someone who didn't need their approval to succeed. When the interview ended, I stood and extended my hand. "Thank you for coming," I said simply. "We'll be in touch." They left without saying much, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and shame. I knew they were replaying every moment of my childhood in their heads, every time they told me I wasn't smart enough, every time they laughed at me, every time they denied my worth. Now, the truth was undeniable. That night, I sat alone in my office, staring out at the city lights. I thought about the little girl I once was, sitting in her room with tears in her eyes, holding a diploma her parents refused to believe was real. If only she could see me now. If only she could know that the pain she carried would one day become her strength. In the weeks that followed, my parents avoided me at family gatherings. They didn't know how to face me, and I didn't press them for an explanation. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their validation. My success spoke louder than any apology ever could. And though part of me still wished they had been the kind of parents who believed in me from the start, I finally accepted that I couldn't change the past. What I could do, however, was change the way I saw myself. No longer the failure of the family, no longer the overlooked, underestimated child. I had built a life on my own terms, one that proved every doubt wrong. So when people ask me if I regret the way things turned out, my answer is simple. I don't regret the disbelief, the ridicule, or even the loneliness, because without it, I wouldn't be who I am today. Their refusal to see my worth pushed me to discover it for myself. And in the end, that was the greatest victory I could have ever asked for.